If you're in search of heavy-duty front-end protection and added benefits in the meantime, this Rough Country full-width LED winch front bumper will be a great pick for your 2018 or newer JL Wrangler. Now, this will be a good option if you're missing that off-road aesthetic and off-road function, and you want a front bumper that's going to bring all of that to the table, whether you're an avid off-roader or you only go off-road once in a while. This package won't just come with the front bumper, but also the addition of an LED light bar if you need better visibility when driving on dark back roads or trails and want a sleek and functional way to add that into your build. Now, as I said before, this is going to feature multiple benefits, including good full-width protection to the front as well as grille protection with this integrated bull bar up top. Now, recovery is also added into the mix with 2 welded D-ring mounts and included D-rings capable of a 9,500 pound pulling capacity for those just-in-case moments, and the D-rings are also painted black to match the sleek styling of this bumper. Now, you can also be the one to pull your buddies out thanks to the winch plate on top that's compatible with all winches with a standard bolt pattern and up to a 12,000 pound pulling capacity. Not to mention, you can swap over your factory fog lights, and this does have a little slant here for that angry eye design. And again, this is going to include a 20-inch single row LED light bar capable of providing 7,200 lumens for a lot of light output out of the front end of your JL. Getting into the makeup of this front bumper, this is going to be made of a 5/32 inch steel plate construction, offering a robust and strong build. And on top of that will be a black powder coat finish that's going to provide that heavy duty appearance and of course protect that steel underneath from any rusting or corrosion, keeping that appearance for a long period of time. And not to mention, this is going to be completely bolt on, so you don't have to worry about modifying your rig, and it's going to have a pretty clear cut install. Now, this will come in at roughly $750, making this more of a premium choice, but I think that's definitely for good reason considering the build of the bumper itself, all the features that it's coming with, and the fact that you're getting an additional LED light bar. This bumper does have some small details in the design, like the lower RC and mesh cutouts, the black D-rings for more of a uniform appearance, as well as the more boxy build that's going to set it apart from others on the page. Not to mention, the incredibly bright LED light bar not only adds a touch of modern style that you may want for your build, but it provides you a lot of function without having to question, making it a great choice. Install will be a 2 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter, taking you about 3 hours to get the job done with some pretty basic hand tools. At this point, we can head over to the shop and check out a detailed breakdown of the install process step by step. So that's going to wrap it up for me. Let's go ahead and get into it.
Tools required for this install include an impact gun, an electric ratchet, a hand ratchet, a few zip ties, a pair of scissors or diagonal cutters, a clip remover tool, a flathead screwdriver, 13mm ratcheting wrench, 7mm wrench, 2.5mm Allen wrench, a couple different size extensions, a swivel adapter, and a 7, 10, 13, 16, and 18mm sockets. What's up, guys? Today we're installing a front bumper on our Jeep. First, we're going to watch a quick video for how to uninstall our factory bumper, and then I'll meet you right back here for the install.
To begin this installation, we're going to need to remove our factory bumper. We're going to begin with the air dam underneath. There's a series of pop clips that we'll have to use a screwdriver or a trim panel removal tool, and there's 2 screws that we're going to use an 8mm socket for. All right, so we have 8 of these push pins all the way across the bottom. We're going to just take and pop the center out, and that's going to release that clip. So once you get the last screw out of the bottom, you're ready to pull the whole shield off. So next we're going to take off this metal shield using a 16mm socket. You're going to have one bolt on either side. After you get those bolts off, you can lift this up and it'll slide right off. So next we're going to unplug our fog light harness. It's located here on the passenger side frame rail. We're just going to press this tab in. And then we can disconnect our plug. So after we have our fog light harness unplugged, you're ready to remove the 4 nuts on both ends of the frame rail. We're going to use an 18mm socket to do this. So the last thing to disconnect before we pull our bumper off, there's going to be 2 push pins, one on either side on the top of the frame rail. We'll need to pop those out with a screwdriver, and then we can pull our bumper off. With everything disconnected, you can remove your stock bumper.
So now that we have our bumper removed from the Jeep, our next step is to remove our 2 fog lights. So we have a plastic cover on each side. Each one's held in by 6 push clips. So we'll grab a clip remover tool, pop off those clips to get access to our fog lights. So now once we have our 6 push clips removed, we can pull up on our cover. And now we'll disconnect our harness, and then we have 4 7mm bolts that we need to remove to pull out our fog light. So we'll push in on the tab on the top side of our connector. And then we can grab our 7mm socket to remove all of our bolts. And then we can pull our fog light out of place and do the same thing on the other side. Next, we can remove our wire harness. We have 2 nuts on this side, 2 nuts on this side, and then we have the same thing on the other side. So we'll grab our 13mm socket and take these nuts out. So now that we have our nuts removed, we can pull this big metal crash bar out of our bumper. So we have a clip here and a clip here at the end of our harnesses that we can take a clip remover tool to pop out before we pull this piece out. So now we have access to all of our push clips that are holding in our harness. I'm just going to get the flat part of the clip remover tool to push these out of their holes. You can also pop this piece out of the way, just give yourself some more room. Now we can do that same thing with the rest of our clips on the other side. So now once we have all of our clips released, we can come over to the side with our body connector and fish our harness out through this hole. So now our first step to installing our new bumper is to install our fog lights. So the first thing we're gonna have to do is install our bracket. That's gonna line up to these two holes on the side. We're gonna be putting our button head bolt with a flat washer in through the back, sliding our bracket on, and then we'll put another flat washer and a nut on the front side, and then tighten that up with a 7mm socket. So now we'll be installing our two bolts into these holes. So I'll lay that bracket on top, and then I'll get a nut, slide that into place. And then we can take our bolt, thread it into our nut. Then we're gonna do that same thing up top. So now once we have our two bolts threaded, we can get a 2.5mm Allen wrench and a 7mm wrench to get in there and tighten those down. So now we're ready to mount our fog light. So we're going to be using those same bolts with a flat washer. We're going to be coming up through the bottom this time. And then on the top, we'll put another flat washer and a nut. So now this bottom corner one is going to be the hardest one to get in place once our light's in there. So I'm going to do that one first. And then we'll get a flat washer and a nut on top of there. Now since our fog light housing is plastic, we don't want to tighten these nuts down too tight. So I'm just going to grab a finger on the bolt side, and then we'll just snug up our 7mm nut with a 7mm socket. And then once we're done with this side, we can do that same thing on the other side. Next, we can mount our nut and stud plates into our frame hookups. Now you could go stud up top or at the bottom, it really doesn't matter. I'm gonna go at the top, I find it's a lot easier to get a nut onto a stud with less room than it is to get a bolt into a nut. So we'll slide that in and then put our retaining clip on, and then we can just spin that down into place. And we'll do that same thing over here. And then we'll repeat that same process on the other side. So next we can install our light bar. So we'll lay it down into the cutout for it. Then on each side we have a hex bolt with a lock washer and a flat washer, as well as a spacer. So now we'll slide our spacer in between our mount and our light bar. And then we can get our bolt started into our light bar. Then we can come over to the other side and do the same thing. And then once we have that threaded in on both sides, we can take a 13mm ratcheting wrench to snug it up. And we'll do that same thing on this side. And then we can take our harness and we'll slide it through this hole right down here. So now we're ready to mount our bumper up to our Jeep. It would be a good time to grab yourself a buddy to help you get your hardware started on that side while you do it on your side. Into our nuts, we're going to be putting a bolt with a lock washer and a flat washer. And onto our studs, we're going to be putting flat washer, lock washer, and nut. Now once you have this side all done, you can do the same thing on the inside stud and the studs on the other side. And now once we have all of our nuts and bolts hand tight, we can go back in with an 18mm socket to tighten everything down. And then we can do that same thing for our remaining nuts and bolts. So next we can run our wiring harness. Now I've got this laid out over the engine bay, kind of where everything goes. On the driver's side, we have our switch, which is going to be going through a hole in our firewall right next to our brake booster. And then over on the passenger side, I have the terminal connectors for our battery, as well as the connector that's going to go down to our light bar. So now we can take our switch and feed it down through this hole. Now you might have a grommet in yours, however we don't have one in ours, so we're just going to slide that through. So next we can add a couple zip ties up across the back here, just to hold our harness in place and clean it up a little. So we have a bracket right over here that we can slide a zip tie under, and then we can take a pair of scissors or diagonal cutters to chop off the excess of our zip tie. Now over here, I'm going to bunch up all of our excess wire that we didn't put through the firewall. So now we can throw one more zip tie over here on the passenger side. And then while we're over here, we can connect our battery terminal connectors. So we'll grab a 10mm socket to remove one of our nuts on our positive. And we'll slide that connector over our post and reinstall our nut and tighten that up with our 10mm socket. And then we'll come over to our negative and loosen our nut up with that same 10mm socket. Then we can thread our nut back on. And we'll snug that up with our 10mm socket. Next we can run our connector for our light bar down towards the ground. We have a little gap right down here to the side of the battery tray that'll run down into our fender liner. So we'll just feed that down. And now we can go underneath of the Jeep and start making our connection. So now we're down in our fender well where our harness is coming out. Now we're going to want to keep this away from our suspension components. So I'm going to run it up this way. We have a couple holes right here that we could zip tie this to keep it out of the way. So I've got a zip tie that I've made a couple bends on just so that we can be able to angle it. So we'll stick it in through the top hole and it'll bend out through the bottom for us. Then I'm just going to take our harness and tuck it under our fender liner. And then we can zip tie that up out of the way so that it will stay away from all of our moving components. Chop the excess of our zip tie off. Next we can reinstall our fog light harness. So we'll just plug that back in where we disconnected it from. And then we can run our two harnesses together We'll plug this into our fog light first, and then we can run both harnesses across to the other side. So now we'll plug in the connector into the back of our fog light. So now you can run these wires however you'd like. The way I'm gonna do it is go right over our frame rail with both of our harnesses. So now on the other side, we're just gonna do the same thing and go right over our frame rail with our two harnesses. And now we'll plug in the harness for our light bar and then get our cap and screw that on. And then next we'll plug in our fog light harness, and then we can zip tie all of this extra harness up out of the way. So now we'll just plug in our fog light connector on this one. It's gonna be the same exact thing as the other side. Just press it in until it clicks. And then we can just bunch up all of our excess wire. We can run a zip tie right through this hole here. Next we can mount our D-rings. So we'll just unthread this stud and then line it up and thread it back in. And then we can do that same thing on the other side. Now lastly, we can hop inside the driver's seat. We'll grab our switch that we fed through the firewall, and then we'll just peel back on our double-sided tape. You can mount this wherever you'd like to. I'm just gonna stick it down right around here. So that'll wrap up this review and install of the Rough Country full width LED winch front bumper for your 2018 and newer Jeep Wrangler JL. Thank you for watching, and for all things Wrangler, keep it right here at extremeterrain.com.